Hello and welcome everyone to Vanquis Bank All or Nothing Journey to the Cloud. Today we are joined by Rajan Mistry and Andrew Williams, who'll be sharing with us today a real-world example of the pitfalls and benefits of moving to the cloud and how organizations can use the tools available to migrate in an efficient way without the common big bang approach. Now, before I hand over, just a bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, please pop these into the chat box, which you should see on your panel below, and the speakers will answer them at the end of their talk. We are recording this session, and this will be made available after and sent to you by email. So let's begin. I'll hand over. Thank you.
Thanks, Adele, and welcome everyone. So now myself and Raj are going to talk through the journey we've been on here at Vanquis in the cloud. So what we're going to cover is briefly what we do here at Vanquis, and then the considerations you need to take when moving to the cloud, any mistakes or costs that you want to be familiar with. And then we're going to look at our first analytics platform in the cloud, which was both SAS and Hadoop, and discuss how we went from that platform to help reduce our costs since that and improve performance for the users. And finally, then we're going to look at where we're moving in the future with our analytics platform in the cloud, with the move to SAS Fire and tools such as Synapse to take advantage of the recent partnership between SAS and Microsoft going forward. So now I'm going to pass over to my colleague Raj to talk through what we do here at Vanquis.
Thanks, Andy. So hi everyone. So I'm Rajan Mistry. So we're Vanquis Bank, and we're a part of the Provident Financial Group. You may have heard of them. They've been around since, I think it's 1880, and across the group, they're a leader of non-standard UK consumer credit products. So these range from credit cards, loans, vehicle finance as well. And like many other banks and institutions these days, we consider our data to be one of our most critical assets. So we're aiming, we have approximately 1.7 million customers with multiple products with us. And we use the data from those to keep servicing their needs. And we use that across like credit risk, customer decisioning, fraud detection, profitability modeling, our operational performance, liquidity forecasting, and many areas across the business wherever we can. We started our journey to the cloud in about 2016 as a bank, and that was to the Microsoft Azure cloud. What we're gonna go into a lot more detail on our migration to Azure, but I think some of the stuff that we're going to go through is still very applicable to any cloud vendor to help you on your migration. So just a quick bit about Andrew and myself is that we've been both here at Vanquis Bank for the last, I've been here for 4 years and Andy for, I think, about 2.5. And over that time, we've been responsible for all of Hadoop and all of SAS across both on-prem and in the cloud in the bank, and how we use the platforms and get the most value out of them. We're going to talk to you today about our journey. We're going to talk about the platforms that we built and some of the challenges we faced. We're not here to try and sell you anything. We're purely just here to hopefully give you some information that will help on your journey wherever you are in the cloud. So if you go to the next slide, Andy. Thanks. So before we get into any of the technicalities, I just wanted to cover off some key considerations for when you move to the cloud. And this can be whether designing your platform or just migrating databases and systems over. So firstly, your costs. So one of the big push one of the big reasons to move to the cloud is that moving from a CapEx model to an OpEx model for your IT infrastructure and storage and your components on there. You have those initial costs to build your platforms and provision all your hardware. However, you should consider though the licensing and vendor support for the applications and operating systems that you have on there. We're not going to go too much into detail in licensing, but one of the challenges that we did face over time was the way that some of the older tools are licensed don't make it very cloud friendly for some of the elasticity that you might want to get. Within the cloud, there's a lot of disaster recovery and backup solutions, sometimes readily available out the box for the services that you provision. However, when you're bolting multiple systems and platforms all together, it can prove quite challenging to actually have a full disaster recovery and make sure there's no loss of data, and ensuring how much almost you want to spend on the level of which you want to have the speed of recovery, or how much backup history you want and how quick you want to be able to restore that. So next is performance, some key things for a data analytics platform. And again, your CPU, memory, and IOPS are your core sort of elastic components. But I think one of the key considerations here is really test on scaling them together and test how they do perform together, just to avoid any bottlenecks. Your elasticity and capacity. So obviously cloud is one of the big moves towards it, is that it does give you the ability to scale. However, you want to ensure that your platforms can scale with minimal or no downtime, and also you should still capacity plan, because just adding additional power to systems does not necessarily help the underlying problem of potentially inefficient code or bad processing that's happening on there. So next has actually been a big one for us that we're going to go into quite a lot more detail in today, and that's on the user experience and the capability of analytics platforms. So it's very likely that you'll have various data analysts, you'll have data scientists, you'll have your executive report consumers, all trying to use the platform in slightly different ways. They might be reading different sources of data, and then they'll also be wanting to connect into maybe internal systems on-prem or other like cloud offerings that are available in the marketplaces, or they might even be looking to link up with other clouds, depending on your cloud strategy. Next is the data governance. I think it's key for any organization. At Vanquis Bank, we are a regulated business, so we do focus quite heavily on our data security and the quality of our data, just to ensure full security, as our customers are entrusting us with their data, and so we must be compliant. And so we are obviously impacted by the PCI, the payments card industry standards, GDPR, and handling personal information. So it's key for your platform. So I'm going to go into now the first initial platform that was built. So if you go to the next slide, Andy. Thanks. So what you're seeing here is a high-level diagram of effectively a tech stack for first initial platform that was built. This was built by an external third party in, I think it was towards the end of 2016 and early 2017. So this is when Vanquis Bank were first on that cloud journey, and there were some various other mobile apps and databases and processes looking to move up into the cloud. And in the bottom left, you're seeing some very high level metrics that we've put together, just that as we go through the platforms, you'll see the relativity of some of the changes that we've made, and how sometimes costs might have gone up, but things might have got better. So At high level, this is it's one single environment, and it's at the core of it is a Hadoop cluster. So that's what you're seeing on the left, hosted there in Azure. So that's a Hortonworks IaaS Hadoop cluster, and this has this was built up of I think off the top of my head, I think it was about 20 to 25 virtual machines, all with a large amount of premium solid state disk mounted onto each of those virtual machines for the core part of Hadoop for HDFS. On top of that was SAS. So that was SAS 9.4 installed on top of Hadoop, which for those that know Hadoop and SAS, that's your workspace sessions that are running as Yarn applications on that cluster. So users would then connect into that through various clients, mainly the thick clients from SAS. So yeah, Enterprise Guide, your DI Studio, those kind of applications. And then there was a cluster of Windows servers that were hosting those thick clients on there. So, and then our users would then connect in from a remote published app from either their desktops in the office, their work laptops, or potentially like a Citrix farm that's hosted on-prem. Then we also have a SaaS environment on-prem. So that's there's multiple servers there. There's the kind of that is the core sort of SaaS platform that has been in the bank since day one. That holds all the kind of legacy processes that eventually do need a lot more attention and migrating to the cloud. There was also the sort of shared file systems for storing that data, and various SQL data warehouses and operational data stores on our on-premise networks. So this platform as a whole, it was just one big environment. So there was no dev, test, or production. It was the same, everything running on the same hardware. There was no ability to be able to sort of test config changes or software version upgrades without ultimately impacting any production workload. And a lot of the data that was stored on there was effectively just replicated into that environment. So it was copied from our SQL data warehouse on-prem. Some of the core files from SAS were just copied up there. So there was actually just a lot of inefficient data movement happening. There's probably, I don't know, maybe 200 or 300 jobs just copying things around. But as this environment was just completely isolated, the user experience was very bad. So from where those Windows clients are, there was the ability to sort of copy and paste your code and move data in and out for the end users was, and also sort of share reports and get that value out of that data, that they effectively couldn't do it. And because of that, there was such a poor user experience and very little uptake on the platform. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Andy, and he's going to run through some of the changes that we've made over the next few years.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Raj. So starting in about 2018, that was our first initial step forward to make a more performant, scalable, and reduce those high costs. So because everything was built in one environment, so you got Hadoop with SAS on top, and then you've got the premium storage disks, it was quite hard to tackle all that in one go. So what we decided to do was to try and separate those aspects out, so then we can focus on each one individually. So what we did was we moved to traditional SAS grid environment, for those of you familiar with SAS, and removed the dependency on Yarn. So typically when SAS runs on Yarn, someone would log on to a session, but it'll just stay there until the person logs off, basically. So we had issues with concurrency. So removing SAS from there immediately allowed us to use more of our yarn processing for our yarn cluster for all our Hive processing, and gave greater concurrency on the platform for our users. So immediately there, just that one step, we got the user experience up and more people could come onto the platform. And that really was the first step in allowing us to then focus on the high costs and the performance, which was mainly on the Hadoop disks, which is where most of our cost was. But at this stage, nothing else really changed. So now I move over to what we started in 2019, and this is sort of where we are at the moment. So this is our first major jump, and the first part of reducing those costs was to get rid of that premium storage disk. So we looked at a few different Azure offerings, blobs and things, but the best cost-effective and unlimited storage, redundancy and permissions, etc., was using the Azure Data Lake Gen 2. So we made a decision there to go and use the Azure Data Lake Gen 2 as our storage for our traditional HDFS. And it was also very, very cheap if you compare it to your premium disk. So we've done some costing here, and looking back, we've probably saved about 90% of our costs on our storage just by doing that switch. Because we've then changed our storage, we're going to have to change our Hadoop cluster because it disappeared. So we looked at a few different offerings here. There was Cloudbreak from Hortonworks and HD Insight, which both can spin up multiple clusters. We decided to go with HD Insight because it was more of a pay-as-a-service, and it was slightly cheaper at the time, and it integrates better with the data lake. But that moving to that has allowed us to spin up a prod, a dev. We can spin up clusters on demand, but yet still point to the same data lake. So previously, if we had to spin up a new cluster, we would have had to create all the VMs, copy all the data across, and that's quite a big overhead. Now, with a few clicks of a button, I can give Credit Risk or someone else their own little HD Insight cluster, which we can auto scale and destroy at the end of the day. So from that point of view, our costs significantly went down, and that was a benefit to everyone, and also the user experience increased. At this point as well, we thought would rebuild the SaaS environment slightly, just to do infrastructure as code, put it on some more optimum newer VMs, and we could rebuild that as well if we wanted to. With the HD Insight cluster, there has been a few issues going forward with if you've got lots and lots of small files on your data lake, it will be very slow at processing those, and that's one of the things, the drawbacks to HD Insight, which is in documentation. So workarounds, we've had to compress those files together to get the performance up, but generally users are pretty happy with that platform. And at this point as well, we also introduced a web client to SaaS, which was called SaaS Studio. So that allowed users from their work laptops, work desktops, sorry, to connect via a browser and do their programming, the reports and everything from there, as opposed to logging into a remote box, which allowed them to take their code from SaaS on the prem and just copy it into their web browser and reuse it, rather than previously they would have to type it out because there was no method to copy that code up. So that's basically where we are now. But generally, we've got a lot better uptake and lower cost than our previous one. And now I'm going to take you where we're heading. So we've done create a few POC environments to test a number of things out, and this is the sort of approach we're going for. So previously we've got a SaaS on-prem environment which has access to a number of data, and then you've got the analytics in the cloud, but previously they couldn't really talk to each other. We sort of connected that whole world into one central platform. So the first thing is where a user logs on. So previously they'll log on to their desktop PC in the office or via Citrix, and then connect into it. Here we're introducing the Windows Virtual Desktop solution. So this gives a user access to everything they would usually have on-prem, file systems, Teams, Outlook. Their general day-to-day work doesn't change, but this is hosted in Azure, and that can connect a lot easier in to our cloud environment. It's all in one environment now. And then we're gonna be looking at moving SaaS to our the new release of SaaS Via, which is going to be built in Kubernetes, which allows us to spin up multiple clusters through code. We can deploy in days, they can auto update, and we can auto scale that environment out. With that new release of SaaS as well, we can talk back to our on-premise data, and users can do all their coding from that one central platform. It also can natively talk to the local file systems on-prem, which has that SaaS data in as well. And it's a lot more integrated with Azure, because the recent partnership in the announced between SaaS and Microsoft, a lot more space, changes are coming to that platform. So we're trying to take advantage of that by integrating more heavily with the data lake. So the SaaS Via platform can directly communicate with the data lake, which we couldn't do before. And we're looking at also replacing HD Insight with Synapse. So we've done, like I mentioned, some POCs, and a like-for-like performance we're finding for a typical user query that would take, say, half an hour on HD Insight. It's taking about 5 minutes on Azure Synapse, and the cost is 1/10 of the cost for that comparison between the two environments. So this is the way that we're heading going into 2021. Probably maybe June time next year. This could be the new experience for the users. So what will it look like for a user? So this is more a hybrid approach. So we've got that one central platform now for all our users, as opposed to their on-prem and on cloud users doing stuff everywhere. So that one central platform for users to use that can access their data from on-prem and the data sources we've got in the cloud. It also allows Python and R users to connect to this platform. So on SaaS Via, they've made it more open source friendly. And a lot of the graduates coming into the bank don't have these SaaS skills, but they do have Python and R skills. They can come onto this platform now without needing to be trained up in SaaS and just use their Python and R language to do the same thing that everyone else does: code, create reports, models, and things like that. The remote client desktop farm is getting replaced with the Windows Virtual Desktop, which is more integrated with Office 365 and SaaS and things like that. Office 365 is integrated with SaaS Via, so you'd be shocked that a lot of the users are still using Excel. I assume that's the case at your organization as well. By integrating that with the SaaS Via capabilities, we can help those users on a journey to create greater reports and start using more up-to-date technology, such as SaaS Visual Analytics, which is our reporting area that create the interactive reports with terabytes or gigabytes of data in memory, and that data those reports are automatically refreshed every time the data gets updated. We're also looking at using visual data mining and machine learning as part of the SaaS Via package for users to create their models. So currently, the platforms that we have users creating the models are user code, thousands of lines, and there's no standardization of those models. Using the more up-to-date techniques and more managed platform, we can start to standardize our models and get them to delivery a lot quicker on this new platform. And again, we're integrating more with the Azure Data Lake storage because of the benefits that comes with cost and performance as well. So now I'll pass on back onto Raj to carry on with the presentation.
Thanks, Andy. So when I think when we look back over the last sort of 3, maybe 4 years on the replatforming that we've done, the movement of data, and looking at how potentially we could have done things better, or I think there's some key areas, and the first one is effectively your data strategy. I think it's for any organization, it's key, and quite often people can say they're doing it, but it's how do you go from that high level roadmap and tech stacks to saying like, I want to do this kind of use like the latest technologies and the latest tools on the market, but how do you actually implement that in a way that complements your existing processes and integrates in with everything else that you're doing? So you might often find that you have, and this is a challenge that I think we have at Vanquis, which is we have all these like operational data stores, there's data warehouses, there's all these business processes, some of them being manual, and so many things going on. And these need to be considered to sort of migrate together because they're often being worked on individually. There might be certain teams working in silos that could be doing these upgrades, and they, I think having that high level view and actually migrating them together and working out how everything joins together to bring them all up together, I think they'll all in time complement each other as you migrate to the cloud. And also you'll probably also realize that some of it won't need to come, and it will encourage you to probably not do lift and shift the sort of bad workloads that you would like to leave behind. Another issue that I think we have faced, and where I think we can now, I think with Azure Data Lake, is our data ingestion. So just moving data in and out of our platforms, whether it's in and out of the cloud, and even sending it to third parties, to our suppliers and vendors, is that we can now standardize and have them in a repeatable format of effectively ingesting data and storing it on the data lake. When the great thing with the data lake is that you don't need to have, for example, Hadoop running to be able to write directly into that data lake. You can have tools just writing into it directly, as it treats it like an Azure blob store, which to those AWS people is the sort of equivalent of S3. And so it's been quite helpful for us, and I think that strategically it definitely it is the sort of core component. The actual workloads that you're lifting to and from to Azure, and things that you might want to leave behind, is that you can quite often, I'm sure everyone's probably seen this, where there's a big inefficient process, and the answer to solving it is to upgrade and add more resources to the system to kind of cover up the problem, when ultimately we would all like to not do that lift and shift approach. But I think with the hybrid approach that we're also looking at, is that it kind of breaks down some of those barriers where there's not suddenly huge dependence on, okay, we're gonna build this new warehouse over here and nothing can go off of that, and then all of a sudden you don't have the latest like cloud tools available on the data that you want, that might suddenly solve the business problem that's needed to be done. So, Andy, if you just hop to the next slide. So to conclude, the big thing I would say is to plan ahead and really look at the big picture in what you want to move, but also don't try and do everything all in one go. Is that I think knowing how everything sits together. Again, like I said earlier, where you can have all the data in one system or in one location, if your tools can't access it or you're limited by bandwidth, dragging it across networks, you'll suddenly just ruin that sort of user experience, and even potentially you want to be careful to not build more tech debt for you in the future. But I think a big thing for us is with the actual user adoption and how when we've looked more into how users will access the data, how they want to play around with it, whether they want to be building reports and sharing that information, but still doing that in a secure way, but giving it the kind of attention that it needs to give them a good user experience has been key to the uptake of the platform and just the utilization of the platform, the value that we're getting out now to be able to do the kind of larger scale analytical workloads. But also, yeah, so start small, build out. You don't have to do everything all in one go, and if you can start small, get the good standards, get the sort of repeatable workloads there and in, then I think you'll benefit quite long term for that. And also, yeah, just engage the users in all along the way. Like we've benefited quite a lot from just where we've been testing and building POCs of certain little components and getting our users properly on board. And I think it helps build the community within the bank for doing this. So yeah. So if anyone that is interested at Vanquis Bank in our tech and change area, we are hiring. We've got quite well. I mean, it was said even today that we have just how much work we have on. So we're always hiring for new people with sort of various skills. And to just get in touch with us, we're on all the kind of main social media platforms. We've got our careers page there. We can see direct vacancies. But I think just get in touch. There may be other roles that aren't specifically there. But now, I guess I'd like to open up for a Q&A. I think I've seen some stuff on the chat, but Adele, maybe if I hand over to you for a moment.
Great, thank you so much for sharing your journey so far and for those insights. I've had actually a couple of questions submitted directly, so maybe if I can kick off with those first. And obviously in the meantime, if anyone does have any questions, please do put them into the chat box and we can move on to those. So the first question that I had was, how much of an increase in users have you had from the initial platform to now?
So the initial platform, we probably was, not to be crazy, but probably like 3 or 4 people were using that big platform. I'd say now probably we've probably got about 30 to 40 people currently using it on a day-to-day basis, but then that spreads out to double that occasionally per the week. So probably definitely like 100% increase from back on our original platform to today.
Great, thank you. And I think you may have covered this now, but the question was asked, how much have you saved in platform costs over time?
I can take this one if you like. So yeah, I mean, so we probably saved, I think, from the initial one, if we were to not talk about sort of licensing and those sorts of things, I think we're probably at about, we probably saved about 50%. So we're running at like half the kind of costs that we were, and we're getting a lot more performance. So I think, and I think that kind of comes through from actually not having to have everything always on all the time. so you can then run a more powerful system for less time as you go to that OpEx cost model. But yeah, I think the main big win for us was on migrating to Azure Data Lake. So that gave us the kind of 90% drop in storage costs, because also with Hadoop you're paying for the 3-time replication factor to keep that high performance data, when in Azure Data Lake you can still, you only pay for it once, when with Hadoop directly IaaS you'll be paying for it 3 times. So yeah, I think that covers off. Okay, I can see, so there's a question here. So it's, how is the adoption on the latest tools in VIA for your traditional based SaaS coders? So that one, Andy, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so they've actually the demands increased more than I was expecting on the POC environment, where we've now got users using all of the tooling that comes with it, and getting away from the traditional coding they were doing. Example, there was one user, he coded something, and it on the traditional environment it was taking around 20 minutes to run, and he ran it on the SaaS VIA platform where all the data is in memory. It ran in 30 seconds. So they're greatly using a lot of the new tools now, and we're trying to play catch up.
Okay, so the next question I can probably take. So it's how did you overcome the security issues and possible loss of connectivity to the cloud? Do you have any backup systems on-prem to overcome this unlikely situation? So connectivity wise to the cloud, so we have we're using the Microsoft Azure, the express route. So we've got a fast, secure connection that directly links to our core data center on-prem and directly to the cloud. So I don't think we've ever had any actual connectivity issues. And I think now that I think at the time it was always the access was restricted to limit so that a user couldn't effectively bring down the network by writing a big query. But I think now as Express Route has advanced and that there is a lot more bandwidth, is that we don't really have that issue too much. And so I think the next one here is around the backup systems. So we don't directly back up what runs on the cloud. We don't have that backed up directly on-prem. It's they're effectively different environments, but we then do have the redundancy built in the cloud. So as we do have the good connectivity. So again, we when we rebuilt in 2019, the HG Insight clusters, the SaaS environments were all built using like ARM templates and Terraform, so you can quite quickly rebuild your platforms if you're to go to like another region, if there's an issue with Microsoft Azure. And I guess with the data, I think now Data Lake does give us quite a lot of redundancy, but it doesn't give us snapshots.
It's deployed in different zones as well. So if we were to lose one zone in Azure, like West Europe or something, we'd pick up the data from a different zone. So we do have, it's the same for the SaaS and Hadoop as well. We do have that sort of Azure's built-in redundancy. So the cloud system, do you need less support, on-prem support? We're getting there. We still have a number of jobs that run on-prem. that require the support, but trying to move all the analysts themselves into one central platform is helping our support, because previously you'd have the same people using two environments, and now trying to push them into one environment is helping that support factor, rather than being split into two different systems to sort out.
Okay. So next question, some great questions coming in. So as your company expands, will the monthly transaction payments exceed the savings, the larger savings? Okay, so is this as our data volumes increase? So one thing that we found, like using Azure Data Lake, is that the storage is so cheap. And by separating out our compute and storage, we don't necessarily have that issue. And I think given how much we've saved, and we've saved by with effectively replatforming to be able to scale, I think is the main one, where at first you couldn't, so you're paying a large amount of money for a static platform, is that now we can. So no, that as in we don't expect that like our data volumes will exceed the savings that we've made from these changes. And if they do, I think it's not a bad thing, because we're at least we're paying for the right thing. And as we start to mature with it, we can start looking at different sort of cost centers within the business and start to be able to charge the storage costs and compute costs directly to them. So we actively almost work as more as a service to the business.
What do you think your biggest challenge is going to be in the next phase? Probably the biggest challenge is going to be the skills of our team and the people deploying, because now we're moving to more containerized solutions, Kubernetes. People in the support on our side and deploying those solutions need to be skilled in those areas, especially when the platform's built and passed on to the run team. They need to know those skills. So we're constantly doing training courses to try and keep ahead of the curve, but that's probably getting the broader IT base trained up in those skills will probably be the biggest challenge, I think.
I think the next one is the data encrypted in the cloud. So on Azure Data Lake Gen 2, yes, it is. It's encrypted at rest, and as you're using with HC Insight, it is all encrypted in transit as well. So, and again, we use various blobs to archive off data, and yeah, it is all encrypted. We have to for our regulatory standards, we have to keep everything encrypted. And I think the next one is about, so how difficult would it be to move your cloud data to another vendor if you needed to for whatever reason, hate being hostage to a cloud platform? So I think, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing as companies now look to go multi-vendor. I think it is. I think it's something that people often say, yes, we want to do it, so they have a bit more purchasing power from the vendors. But I think at the moment it will be quite difficult. But I think as we move to say for Azure Data Lake, that it's quite easy. I think that there are all the components, say with AWS and GCP, to directly connect into that and suck all that data across. I think as we containerize everything, so I think it will remove that whole layer of virtual machines, and suddenly we sort of standardize the workload there. So I think by doing some of these things here, like, it then will enable us to be able to go multi-vendor. I think though, from another perspective, is that we with SAS and Microsoft recently announced like a very large partnership to effectively be their chosen vendor. And I think the integration that they're having with the Azure stack, and again with Office 365, and I think you look at, it seems like Microsoft have, I think they're really doing quite well at the moment. I think all the latest tools and components within them are, they're doing quite well. So I think it'll be interesting to see whether we would have a requirement to go multi-vendor in the future. But I don't know if you've got anything to add on that, Andy. It's
no, not really. Just yeah, everything we're building is infrastructure as code. So most of the components between Azure and Synapse and Amazon and things like that, you can reuse most of the components there. So are you using marketplace images for SAS in Kubernetes or custom ones? So the SAS in Kubernetes release has only just come out, and it's not in the marketplace at the current. We're building we've got our own templates for deploying Kubernetes clusters, and we're merging those in with the SAS templates. So they're both SAS and ours to our standards, and then it's deployed that way using Terraform scripts as well.
Guessing the cloud solution means working from home is more easy to do. You need tokens and special builds on laptops. Do you want to take this one, Andy? Because I think you've been quite close to the
yeah. So the Windows Virtual Desktop solution that we're trying to deploy is you log into your laptop, but it takes the full screen. To log in, you would get your security token to your phone device or whatever you set up to enter that token in. But then once you're in, it's just like remoting into a remote desktop that you would at work. It's you've got everything there, headset, all the communications work fine. Yeah, sometimes I forget that I'm connected to work when I'm on my laptop because you can't really tell.
Because yeah, I think a lot of us at Vanquis, like we use our personal networks and then we connect in using, say, we have like Citrix being hosted on-prem, so we'll connect in there and then be accessing our cloud platforms. I think we've been quite lucky given when there was such a large, where I think obviously with COVID this year, where everyone in the bank was suddenly working from home, like for our analytical workloads, it actually didn't make any difference. We didn't have like a sudden surge or any bottlenecks anywhere really, because I think the data is being still held in the cloud. I think just the way that people are accessing the clients, and I think the way that we went through with even where the thick clients were being run on a Azure VM, and then they'll just have a remote window connecting to it. So it doesn't really, so even what they're doing there is still like, as long as, I think the issue that sometimes they might have was like a laggy mouse, like just, or typing, and that would just be the kind of latency between where their desktop is. But it didn't have any impact on like query runtimes or the actual workload that's happening on the clusters. So yeah, it's been quite good. But I think as we go to Windows Virtual Desktop, I think it will help reduce the pressure on, and almost the requirement for big expensive like laptops and the desktop PCs that are required physically. So yeah, I think that's all the questions for now. I think if anyone's got any more, I guess feel free to reach out to us. I think our LinkedIn's are available on I'm trying to think, do we have links to them? I think it's quite easy to get hold of us. Yeah, no, good to hear you enjoyed it. I'll hand over back to you, Adele.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time this evening and for sharing your story and for answering the questions. And a big thank you to everyone that's joined us. Obviously, please do continue to follow the Vanquis journey online. And as you mentioned, we can connect directly with you both, I guess, on LinkedIn. So that's great. So thanks, everyone, and hopefully see you at a next session soon. We look forward to hearing about the next phase.
Thank you.
Thanks,
That's
everyone.
great. Thanks very much. Take care, everyone.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.